Okay, this is the pre-roll for the Friday night Bible study for let's give the Roman calendar date just for the pre-roll. It's the second day of February, Friday night, second day of February 2018. We're going to be going live. I'll give the Hebrew date in a moment. We're going live on the Sabbath service page of Facebook Live only tonight. We're not going live on the Sabbath.tv because we got some streaming problems to work out. But let's get going. Let's see. We're going live on the Sabbath service page on Facebook Live. So let me hit the button that turns the stream on. And good evening. Happy Sabbath to those of you watching on the Sabbath service page of Facebook Live. Well, we got a light that indicates we are streaming. We had a streaming problem last night as we tried to do the World Watch program, but I think we're okay, at least at the moment, tonight. All right, we got a few things to work out. I've got new software, and then we wind up having some other issues. That the live stream didn't make it on Facebook Live last night, but it did make it on a recording. I will put that in the archive because we covered some things last night. It'd be good for everybody to see. Happy Sabbath, everybody. It's Friday night Bible study time. This is the, let's do the Hebrew calendar date. It is the 18th day of the 11th month on God's holy sacred calendar. On the pagan Roman calendar, tonight is the second day of February 2018. Now, going back to let me come on in here a little bit tighter with you anyway. See if our buttons are working. Uh-oh. I got a new profile, and let me see. Let me try this button over here. All right, there's another way I can make this happen. I can just hit this button here. I think that should do it. Well, okay, I got that new software, and I'm bragging about it, and it's not cooperating. Let's see, there's another way to do this. There we go. Okay. All right. Yes, that makes me a little nervous when things don't work quite right. Brother, it's been a trying and stressful week in a certain way for me. I know perhaps for some of you it has been too. Many of you know I'm wrestling with a problem over in the nursing home, but at the same time, after a lot of fasting and prayer, and I appreciate those of you who've really been putting some prayers up for Kathleen Williams' sake, and I've gotten all kind of comments, and there are a lot of people getting involved, and perhaps that's good, especially if you're putting the prayers up for it, because brethren, we in the church, we are a family that God is building, and there could come a time, this is not always the case, but there could come a time when a person's blood family is doing things with one of the members of God's church that is abusive, that's persecuting, that is wrong. And we as part of that family should not just sit back and watch the wrong happen when we are able to do something. And sometimes we have to put a lot of prayer and fasting in for it first to see, God, what is your will on it? And I kid you not, we don't brag about our fastings, and yet we do encourage one another that, look, if you really humbled yourself before God, put yourself before Him in a lot of prayer and fasting, He will respond and answer. And His answer could be no, His answer could be wait a little longer, or His answer could be, okay, here we go. And He'll show you signs He's opening doors. That happened last week ago yesterday, last Friday, after, I'll just tell you, I did 3 days of fasting in a row, 3 days and nights of fasting. I'm really pushing God to say, look, there's something very bad going wrong over here. You want me to ignore it? You're going to do something? You want me to do something? Will you please do something? Let me lay down here and turn off this heater because I know it puts a noise into the microphone. And totally unexpected. A week ago yesterday, I got a telephone call from the nursing home where Kat, and Brendan, we're going to talk about this a little bit tonight. I'm not going to be on long tonight. Let me tell you we'll come back to Kat in a moment. What I've got for us tomorrow is a sermon given by a longtime minister in the Church of God who just died this past week, Carlton Smith. He, for a long time, was the minister in Santa Barbara, California. And one of the church members who attended that congregation for years, the Santa Barbara congregation, he lived in that area, was assigned to that congregation for his attendance. And he had a tape of a sermon that Mr. Carlton Smith gave just a month or two after Mr. Armstrong died. And this was, of course, long before any obvious signs or any indications that we were going to be having a great apostasy occur from the new administration, that came into being after Mr. Armstrong died. And, with Mr. Armstrong's involvement in that, too. God had Mr. Armstrong have a hand in selecting a new administration that would come into vogue after Mr. Armstrong died. And, all right, the heater's trying to come on down there. I turned the thermostat down. I turned it all the way off now. Well, it's cold here. I don't know how cold. Let me comment on that for a moment as I get settled into talking to you for just a little bit this Friday evening. Again, happy Sabbath, everybody. Friday night Bible study time. Tonight's going to be a little different. I finally got new software, and we've got World Watch back on the air as of last night, even though many of you probably did not see it because for some reason the live stream on Facebook Live didn't lock up. And I noticed we're getting that colored yellow light indicating we're having a streaming problem. And I'm going to have to call the ISP, the Internet Service Provider, and say, what's up? I've done net speed test, and we've got a high upload speed. But that's one reason I'm going to be short tonight, because we may not be streaming properly. I want to check it and see before tomorrow's Sabbath service, see if I can figure out what's going on. But I did want to just tell you what the temperature here is. Let me just do this. Weather.
Right now, it's 33 and partly cloudy.
Okay, it's not quite freezing where I am yet, but it's just 1 degree away from freezing. Okay, I could tell because just before sundown, I ran out to a store and felt a lot of coldness in the air. I went out to a store after I went to a fitness club where I am showering right now because my water heater is knocked out ever since some of these hard freezes. And I've ordered a new one. It's a tankless water heater. I have to order it from a special place, and they shipped my tankless water heater to El Paso, Texas. And then the company I bought it from has gone out of business. So I'm trying to track down, where's my new water heater? And in the meantime, I don't have hot water, and so I go to the fitness club and shave and shower there. Forgot my shaver, except I did have a replacement blade, and I actually took that replacement blade between my two fingers and shaved with that tonight. But I think it did all right, except face it a little bit raw. But again, happy Sabbath to those of you. I don't know what kind of week you've had, but a lot of us are praying for Kathy Williams. She's been put in a nursing home against her will. When she was put in there, was ill, and yet, as long as she had meals brought to her, she would have been fine at home. She was not what's the word they use? She did not have a mental disorder. Now, many of you who know Kathy in the local area know she's a very vivacious personality, but that's not a mental disorder. That's just somebody with a lot of life and effervescence and L'chaim and a lot of good things, and just a unique, loving, stir you up personality, even in this nursing home where she didn't want to be. Kat took the attitude of make sure the other people around her are okay. She's not going to let things, get down if she can help it. But her personality can require the nursing staff to have to be up. A lot of them liked it at first, but then they got a few in there who decided to play one flew over the cuckoo's nest. And they're trying to kill Kathy now. They've been trying to kill her with mind-dulling drugs and put her out of commission early with that junk, that poison. And I want to thank Michael Nielsen. Debbie, your husband, did outstanding. That just the website link he sent. The attorney that wrote the how to deal with a situation where you've got guardianship over someone in a wrongful, abusive situation, such as what this has become. The guy wrote about how to deal with it, and the guy is from Birmingham, Alabama. I have called his office already yesterday, got a call back today, made an appointment with James Carney, the attorney that wrote the Justia article that you posted for me, Michael. Hope you and Debbie are listening tonight, because this is a real big plus. I've made an appointment for 1:30 Monday in James Carney's office. He's in a big office with others, medium-sized law firm. And so I'll be seeing him Monday at 1:30. I have the appointment with the administrator on Wednesday at the nursing facility. This was what I was going to tell you, where I began to saw God's hand involved in this. On Friday, a week ago, I got a call from the administrator of the nursing home who said, we just had a resident here die. Now, it was not Kathy. Kathy's still alive, and I don't know how well, because I'm not able to see her. That's the big problem. Somebody in her family has barred her from being able to see her church members, and they're doing it in the name of Kathy's twin sister. But the nursing home staff told me months ago that Kathleen's twin sister, Catherine, has become incoherent and is mentally disoriented. And that's her twin sister. And her twin sister is the one that somehow has the guardianship, what the nursing home calls the sponsorship. Sponsorship meaning that's where they get the authorization to get the bucks from the government, and apparently she's probably paying in some bucks too. That's why they call them a sponsor. And whatever the sponsor says, the nursing home does. If the sponsor says they can't see a certain visitor can't see her, the nursing home enforces that. Now, when it comes to interfering with a person's religious worship, where if the family says she can't see her minister, she can't see her fellow church members, that's when it gets abusive, it gets persecution, that's when it's wrong, that's when it interferes with and violates civil rights under the laws of the state and the inherent rights which the founding fathers of this nation, the nation's founding fathers, understood. And George Washington wrote about it in a letter he wrote to the Hebrew congregation on Rhode Island. And we're talking about in the late 1700s, 1776 time period. And I've had some people doing some research, legal research for me, and whoever it was out there, one of you sent me the Declaration of Rights that the UN formulated in 1948. And that was very good. I did a little research on that. It wasn't identified as being the Declaration of Rights from the UN. But when I put in enough verbiage and just did a Bing search on the internet, Bing like Google, it came up showing that all of that verbiage came from the Declaration of Rights worded by the UN in 1948. Now that Bing search also showed me that the various sentences of that paragraph you sent me, whoever it was, I forget now, but that was very good. That launched us into something. I'm going to go back and tell you what happened a week ago Friday by the administrator of the nursing home, which was very good. God showing his hand in it. Don't give up, Steve. Here's an open door. Here's where we can go. But we're not over the hump yet. There's still a hurdle. There's still a possible fight in this thing to go. And it may be a big fight, and I'm gearing for it, and I'm hoping you'll pray and back us up in this. Because you got to put the shoe on the other foot. What if you were in this situation, and you had brethren there watching where you're saying, hey, please help me. I don't want to take these mind-dulling, mind-altering drugs. But they pin me against the wall and shove it down my throat and then say, oh, that's a good boy, Stephen, or as they did here as I was going out the door. The door is closing as I'm out, and I hear them saying, that's a good girl, Kathy, and I see them having her pinned up against the wall, forcing the stuff down her throat right after I've heard her say, I don't want that. I don't want to take those medicines, drugs. And they forced it on her. And because I've spoken up for her, they said, well, keep him out of there. And so, because I went to the initial administrator and complained about it, and I was even told that if they refused, we're supposed to write down refused and then not give it to them. But then I saw just the opposite of that happening, and then the administration changed. I go to the new administrator, and the new administrator at first is telling me, well, I don't even know if I can talk to you. It depends on what the sponsor says. If the sponsor says I can talk to you, I can. If the sponsor says I can't, I can't. Well, who is the sponsor? Well, we can't tell you that. They make a big secret out of everything. It's like, you people are doing an abuse, and then you tell those who are trying to investigate it or, try to help the thing, you tell them, oh, we can't tell you who this person is. They make it very difficult, but there's still ways to get through. God has helped. Week ago Friday, the administrator, surprisingly, after giving me some fisticuffs there for a little bit, oh, if they say you can't talk, you can't talk. And if they say you can't see them, you can't see them. We'll bar you and keep you out. I get a call from that same administrator saying, asking me, would I be able to come over? One of the residents there just died, and his daughter, one of his family members, his daughter is here devastated. And, you're a minister, would you come over and console her, counsel her, comfort her? And I said, yeah, I can be over there in a half hour. I'll have to go out to the fitness club and shave. I was working on taking off my old Tinkles water heater at the time. And, and I hadn't shaved or showered for several days. I didn't want to come over, in between, and, like that. So I said, I can be there in a half hour. And they said, well, they hoped they could, he said, that'll be fine, that'll be fine. So I was there, and I saw the person, and it became obvious to everyone that I lifted the person's spirit, was able to show some empathy with her. Some of you know I called you real quickly or emailed you and said, hey, please back me up with some prayer. I've never done this before with somebody I don't know whose father just died, and beside, they're not in our faith. I don't know what their beliefs or faiths are. So I'm jumping into some waters I'm a little bit unsure about. So please back me up with prayer, but I see it as an open door because that administrator, if I comply with her request to come over and try to console and help the person who is devastated by the fact that her dad just died there in their nursing home, well, that'll open the door and help me be able to talk to that administrator about this situation with Kat a little better. So I did that, and thanks to those of you who prayed about it. I seem to have gotten some great favor with the person who was devastated. I was amazed. Got them turned from a state of just depression, mourning, the sadness, the sting of death in its early stage, the shock of someone, boom, dying, your parent dying. And she actually went out of there with a smile on her face and saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. And, the staff seeing that, and frankly, I was quite surprised. I was surprised. I didn't expect the person to, their demeanor to change that much, to be comforted that much in that moment. Now, they'll suffer some grief and mourning that they'll go through again, in the days following the death, but at least the devastation she had at the moment, the shock, the devastation, just totally took the life out of her, left her with a big sting. After I talked to her for a little bit, she's going out saying, thank you, thank you, thank you so much, and a smile on her face. And I gave her my card and said, if you'd like to go to lunch, call me. It'd be my treat. I'll take you to lunch. And anyway, they all noticed that, hey, that went pretty well. The administrator thanked me very much for coming, and I immediately made an appointment with her to sit down and talk about the situation with our sister in the church, Kat. So that comes up this coming Wednesday. We'd made it for last week, but when I called to confirm the appointment Wednesday morning of this week that's ending now, this week that's ending, I was told that she was out with a family problem, that the administrator was out with a family problem. And so I went back to the nursing home Thursday, and the administrator has a certain dog. It's black and white. I saw one just like it in the tractor store. I bought a little stuffed dog just like that, took it over there. She was there, and I said, hey, this is for your dog. And she said, I said, she was real happy and to receive that. Her dog wasn't there Thursday, but I said, I hope everything's okay with your family now. She says, what do you mean? I said, well, when I called yesterday morning to confirm our appointment, they said you were out on a family problem. She says, no, I was here yesterday. And so I gave her the name of the person I talked to who told me that she was out. And I said, that same person also told me when I asked for when they transferred me to the nursing head, that the name she told me was the name of the nursing head was different. And I said, well, what is the real, she said, what is the name of the head of nursing? And that same person said, we can't tell you that. Excuse me, what's the big secret here? And I let her know there was some funny stuff going on, but I said, well, look, I'm going to overlook that. Can we make a new appointment? And we made it for next week. Now, I need about a half hour or an hour with her because I'm preparing charts and the whole thing. And I'll tell you what I'll do. If you don't mind, I'd like to rehearse that with you tonight. What I'd really like to ask, brethren, those of you who are concerned about this, who know Kathy, or even if you don't know Kathy, who would like to get to know our sister in the church, I want to ask you to please pray about it. I'd like it, I don't want to take this too public because I don't want to turn this into a public Sabbath versus Sunday issue prematurely, or the other issues involved. But those of us who are in the church, we are told to love one another. That was Christ's new command for us, brethren, that you love one another. He said that. It's recorded by John several places. As we read the verses from the Bible on the night of the Passover memorial. That's what we hear a lot over and over again, where Christ said, a new commandment I leave with you, that you love one another. And I'm going to use this little Sally gal, or whoever this is on this thing, to help me be like an electronic concordance. And let me just find one verse. Bible, love one another. That might get us a verse I need. All right, like John 13, verses 34 and 35. Let me flip over there and let's read those real quickly. And John 13, that's a chapter that's often read during the evening of the Passover. Verses 34 and 35 say, a new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another, as I have loved you, Christ said to us. As I have loved you, that you also love one another. Verse 35, Verse 35, by this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love one to another, or as the margin says, if you have love for one another. And Jesus even says in verse 38, after Peter had said to him in verse 37, I'll lay down my life for your sake. Jesus answered Peter, verse 38, and said, will you, Peter, lay down your life for my sake? Truly, verily, Peter, I tell you, the cock shall crow, the cock shall not crow till you've denied me thrice, 3 times. But there are places where Christ told us that we should put the family, we should love, even our enemies, and have love for everyone, but we should especially love the brethren and love one another. And we're told that where one brother is exalted or is made happy over something or rejoices over something, we all rejoice with him. And where one brother suffers, we all suffer with him. And in spite of the fact Kathy does very well in this confinement thing, because she shows a lot of love for the people that are in there with her. She's made friends with those people. However, after a while, that wore off, and a trying situation came on Kathy. As Kathy would refuse the drugs, they became more insistent that she take them. And then they began to involve me when I would come over and conduct an informal Sabbath service for Kathy. We'd read from the Psalms, we'd sing the hymns together. Some of you have seen the videos I've posted on Facebook where I just post a video. Kat and I singing songs together, and Kat, we're doing a acapella a lot of the time, and Kat would liven up the hymn by putting some little boom, 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 booms in there. That's kind of cute with her personality and the way she can the way that only she can do that. And then our little private, and sometimes some of the other residents at the facility would want to join in with us. Would say, fine, you want to sing along with us, Wayne? And some of the others, and they wouldn't quite always know the words, but we'd, put them in front of them, and they'd sing as much as they could, and some others would join in with us and do that. And but then we began to have a little interference by some of the nursing staff who would just totally like we weren't reading from the Bible. They just blurt right in, and it's time to take your medicine. I don't want to, and Kathy would say, I don't want to take that. And so then they would begin to involve me, especially one particular nurse. She'd try to involve me. She'd say, tell her she needs to take her medicine. Like, you as her minister, tell her she has to do this. I'm sorry, I can't make that decision for her. I can't dictate that to her. I can't tell her she's got to take that medicine. That's her decision. And I said, you should respect her decision. And I think at some point I even explained to some of them, and say, look, I've told some of them that, that's an individual thing by each member, even though we teach trust God for your health and your healing. We also say that if you are putting your trust in doctors, you better do everything that doctor says. I'm quoting Mr. Armstrong on that. But if you trust God, and your faith is in God, even Christ tested people in that way. I mean, I put it in terms of test, but it was a test. When he would say to them, according to your faith shall this healing be done for you. One father of a man who had come to Christ and asked him to heal his son was smart enough to say to Christ, after Christ said, according to your faith shall your son be healed. The dad, with great love for his son acknowledged, admitted, put it right out on the line to Christ, acknowledged, even though he'd come and asked Christ to do this, he acknowledged his full lack of faith. After Christ said, according to your faith shall it be done to your son, the dad realized, well, right after you leave, I may have a lot of doubt. And doubt is a negative factor toward faith. But that dad was smart enough not to just say, well, it's probably not going to happen because now I'm going to doubt it all that it's going to happen and my poor son won't be healed. But no, the dad was smart enough to say, well, Christ, help my unbelief. Many of you know this, and we've talked about that here before. And, with the man asking Christ to do that, Christ responded to that very positively, because the scripture tells us that the man's son was healed that hour. So not only did Christ do the healing, but the requirement he put on the father that according to your faith, shall your son be healed. When the man said, well, help my unbelief, God also did that. He helped the man's unbelief. He went the extra mile, you could call it, and gave the man the faith along with it. Like the faith of Abraham was a faith that was given to Abraham. And there was a time when there was a time when Abraham was faithless. He, gave half truths about his wife, calling her his sister, and and other things. But then God worked with him, and going to Hagar was a showing of a certain lack of faith that God had promised that Abraham would have numberless offspring through his wife Sarah. But after years and years goes by, well, when Sarah suggested, well, I guess you better have that child God promised through Hagar. And instead of standing up to Sarah and saying, no, we're gonna wait for God. He promised it through you. He went ahead and just went to Hagar. Well, sounded good to him. Of course, Sarah chewed him out about that later, even though it was her suggestion that he do it that way, which tells you something, man. You got to be careful when your wife suggests certain things that might involve another woman, even though she might suggest it, and she might not realize it even at the moment. Well, what she's really expecting you to do is say, no, honey, you're the one. All right, but anyway, back to this thing with Kat here. Let me just tell you a little bit so you can pray about this, and then I'm going to sign us off. And we'll do more tomorrow. I've got that sermon that Carlton Smith gave in Santa Barbara. It's Carlton Smith, who just died this week, that he gave just a couple of months after Mr. Armstrong died, way before any sign of apostasy was coming. A sermon entitled, Stay in God's True Church. And that's a very interesting sermon. And if you could apply some questions to that today. Well, how would that sermon apply to post-apostasy, and how would it apply to the situation today where the Church of God has become very scattered? Now, the Ephesian era church became scattered. You read Acts 4. It'd be a good idea. Read in the first few verses in Acts 4, and you'll see that the church then is called the church that's scattered abroad. Let me flip there real quick. Let's see, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts. Acts 8, chapter 8. And right from the very first verse, you're going to see the church referenced as... Acts 7 is a long chapter. Here's Acts 8 over on this page. And right in the very first verse, as it's talking about how Saul was consenting unto this death of Stephen, and at that time there was a great persecution against the church, which was at Jerusalem, and they were all scattered abroad throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. And then, after talking about how devout men carried Stephen to his burial, we get to verse 4. And there's a reference again to the church being scattered abroad. Therefore they that were scattered abroad went everywhere preaching the word. Then Philip went down to the city of Samaria and preached Christ unto them. And then we're getting into Pentecost, and the people with one accord gave heed unto those things which Philip spake, and hearing and seeing the miracles which he did. But the point I wanted to get to right there was how the church is referenced as being scattered abroad during the Ephesian era. Now and today, here we are again. The word translated abroad, by the way, can be rendered as worldwide. You look at the Greek English lexicons, you'll see the word translated abroad can be rendered as worldwide. So in that case, it would be scattered worldwide, which, since we at one time were referenced generically by the corporate name of the church, the Worldwide Church of God, to say that the church today is scattered worldwide kind of has a little connection back to the Worldwide Church of God. Today we are scattered worldwide. And although some people have formed groups by hundreds of different names, we're still one church, one body. The church is not an organization. It's not a building. The church is you, brethren. You, me, the members, the body of Christ. The body of Christ are the members that God has called and is forming and fitly framing into a building, a fit building, a temple, a bride for Jesus Christ. But here's what happened a week ago Friday. I got that call asking me to come over and console a family member who had died in the nursing home. I then made an appointment with the administrator for what's now Wednesday of next week. As it worked out, even the way somebody tripped me up to not have my meeting last Wednesday, it's giving me time to be better prepared for this meeting. I'm preparing charts. I'm having a counsel with an attorney that handles protective proceedings when guardianships go wrong, when guardianships go abusive. It's almost as if some of the law that's been set in operation is like for us today to be able to help protect one of our own, one of our family, one of our spiritual family, who's being subjected to religious persecution, being told she cannot see her fellow church brethren or her church ministry, who was coming over and conducting informal services on the Sabbath days for Cat in the home. Vesta, who you see pictured, let me bring this in tighter. Vesta Granville, from the Birmingham area of Alabama. Well, she's actually out in Pinson, but that is the Birmingham general area. It's not Birmingham, but it's not exactly a suburb. It's a separate city, but it's, within reach of Birmingham, easy reach, or not too far away. where Vesta lives, Vesta would go over to the Midfield area, part of another area close to Birmingham. Well, and the nursing home was right on the border, right on one of the borders of Birmingham, within the city limits of Birmingham. Vesta would go over on the Sabbath often, and before we were barred from going there, and would sing songs, sing the hymns with Kat, and now we're not able to do that for the moment. But I think God may be intervening to help change that. Okay, and then now, rather than belabor it tonight, I think I'm going to just say, look, we're in a situation where we got a church member who needs our prayers, and I'll be getting some counsel about what legally can be done come Monday. I'll be putting some of our charts together more for it on Sunday. And the charts will lay some things out like this. And let me share, just from the top of my head, share with you a little outline of that. So whether you know Kat or you haven't known Kat before, you can get an idea of what the situation over here is. Kat came into the church in somewhere between the mid to late 60s. So she's been in the church for over 50 years, the Church of God, the Philadelphia era of the Church of God. She came in the Birmingham, Alabama area. When she first came in, her grandmother was alive, who raised her as a mom, because Kat and her twin sister Catherine were born when her mom was 15 years old and her mother died in childbirth with Kathleen, and her twin sister Catherine. So they never knew their mom, because, as I just mentioned, her mom died in childbirth. Kat's grandparents raised Kat and her twin sister Catherine in a house in Inslee, Alabama, which is located in what is now called the Erskine Hawkins Park. Erskine Hawkins is a black musician. He had a tremendous orchestra. My mother used to go listen to his orchestra at a building that's called Tuxedo Junction, which is right next door to Kat's home. Now, when I first met Kat, my parents were looking for the Tuxedo Junction building, and they were driving back and forth between areas in about a 3 to 4 or 5 mile radius. And my dad kept saying, "No, Mom, it's over here." He'd drive 3 or 4 miles over, and we'd be looking around. They wanted to find Tuxedo Junction. My mom and dad used to go there while they were recording. They could not dance because the Jim Crow laws were in existence then, and this was a black venue, a black orchestra, Erskine Hawkins, a black orchestra leader. And my mom and dad would each pay $0.25 to sit behind the glass and just watch the dancers on the dance floor and listen. They couldn't go out on the dance floor, or under the old Jim Crow laws, my mom and dad would be arrested because it was a black venue. And of course, Jim Crow laws worked just the opposite if it was a white venue. But my mom enjoyed listening, and my mom continued to go there even while she was pregnant with me. So I guess in that way you could say I was hearing the Erskine Hawkins Orchestra and their music from the womb. And maybe that's why I love big band music to this day. It's in my blood, you could say. But Kathy's home is right next to that. Kathy was born in 1937. Tuxedo Junction song was written in 1938 or 1939 when Kat was just a baby. And Glenn Miller then offered Erskine Hawkins royalties for being able to record his song. Erskine Hawkins himself sold 750,000 records back in 1938-39 of Tuxedo Junction. And it wasn't intended to be the hit song. It was on the back of Gin Rummy, what was that song called that was intended to be the hit song, but it wound up being the flop. And Tuxedo Junction took off and sold 750,000 copies because people loved the music of Tuxedo Junction, written by Erskine Hawkins and Williams, Johnson, a couple other of his members. They just knocked it together the night before they were to record that Gin song. You know, they had to have something for the backside, so they stayed up overnight and wrote Tuxedo Junction as they just kind of banged it out. And they banged out quite an award-winning song. But anyway, Glenn Miller recorded it, 41, 42, sold 7 or 8 million copies of it, and that really put it on the in the money for Erskine Hawkins and on the world scene. People still record that song in different countries today. Over in Europe, they're still recording Tuxedo Junction from America. And that building that the song is about, where they would hold dances on Saturday nights, they had a tuxedo shop in that building, and people would get off work. They'd come in their U.S. Steel and other, farming work clothes, and they would rent a locker, hang up their work clothes, rent a tuxedo from the tuxedo shop in the building where Erskine Hawkins would play on the second floor. And on one corner of the building was a turnstile, a trolley car junction, where the trolley car would come in, roll up onto the junction, and they would turn it 180 degrees, because they didn't have reverse on these trolley cars back then. They just went one direction, forward and stop. And so they would turn the trolley car around on the junction, on the turnstile, and point it the other direction, and it would go back to the other end of its route, where there was a junction on that end that would turn it around and send it back this way. And so people would take the trolley to the junction, the trolley car junction, which was right next to the building, which had the tuxedo shop in it, that people would rent their tuxedos from, go up on the second floor on Saturday nights, and dance to the music of Erskine Hawkins. And then after they wrote that song that they called Tuxedo Junction, named after the tuxedo shop in the building and the trolley car junction at one end of the building, that's how it got together to be the whole building, and the whole dance operation began to be called Tuxedo Junction. And the music he wrote that they named after, where they would go dance on Saturday night at the building with the tuxedo shop and the trolley car junction, they'd go dance at Tuxedo Junction. The music was created, it became world famous, and Cat's home is right next door to that building. And so as my mom and dad are trying to find that old building where they used to date, and I'm with them, I'm home from California, and they just wanted to show me, where they used to go for that. And they knew I liked the big band music and stuff. And so we're back in the area where the building actually is, with my mom saying to my dad, Lloyd, and my dad's name is Lloyd, and she'd say, Lloyd, I think it's here, not where you're trying to drive us over there. I think it's over here. And he said, well, we'll drive around here a little more and see if we can find it. And we'd driven around that block and several blocks several times, and they didn't recognize the building. It's different, it's gone down from what it used to be. And here comes Kat walking down the street, down the sidewalk, and I said, hey, Dad, slow down. Let me ask this lady here. She's probably from the area. She might know. And so Dad slowed down. I rolled down the window, and I said, hey, ma'am, can you tell my folks where the Tuxedo Junction building is located? And Kat was near the end of that part of the street where we had stopped and asked her, near the corner, and she said, yeah, turn right at this corner and follow me up to the end of the road, and I'll show it to you. And because Kat was, wherever she had been, she was walking home. And so we turned the corner, and Kat walked up just past her home and up to the Tuxedo Junction building. My dad pulls in, and my dad said, "No, this is not it." And Kat says, "Let me show you, Mr. Gilbreth, the heritage plaque that the sign that shows you this is the building." And my dad read the sign. He still didn't want to believe it, but that was it. I took pictures of my mom and dad right there. Dad had a nice Cadillac then. It looked great next to the Tuxedo Junction building, and Mom had just was becoming weak from some medications that she'd been given that did something adverse to her that wound up putting her into a 3-year terminal illness, which wound up causing her to ask me to please come back home and help her and Dad. But that's how I met Kat. She was walking down the street, and I wasn't back home then. I was still living in California. I would just come for a week-long visit to see my folks in Alabama. Met Kat, went back to California, came back the next summer to visit my folks. Wound up seeing Kat somewhere in a Walmart or some store where we were both shopping. "Hey, Kat, good to see you." My folks really appreciated you showing them the place. And then another summer or two, I see Kat in the summer. All this time, I don't know that Kat's in the church. She doesn't know I'm in the church. But then, after my mother asked me to come back and help her and Dad, I started attending the Birmingham church. Wait a minute. Yeah, maybe that's when it happened. But I'm in service one Sabbath, and I'm talking to somebody there I'd gotten to know. We're toward the back row, and here comes Kat walking behind in the aisleway behind the pews where I was standing talking to somebody, and I said, "That's Kat." I said, "Kat?" And I said, you're in this church?" And she said, "Yeah, 30 years. You?" I said, "Yeah, 30 years for me too." At that time, that's about what it was then. And so we were amazed. We'd known one another for 4 or 5 years, and all that while didn't know that we were both in the same church. All right, hopefully that's interesting to you, just how I got to know Kat. Got to know her before I knew she was in the church, even though she had been in the church and I had church. Now, when I would come on to those visits, if my 5 or 6 day visit, if a Sabbath fell in there, I probably would be attending the local church. But at that time, there were 400 or 500 members in Birmingham, and I didn't run into Kat during those summers. I didn't see her. She didn't see me until, 4 or 5 years later. So Kat's a longtime member of our church. And in about 2012, about 5 years ago, Kat's sister Catherine, who was living up in Michigan then, became very ill. Some flu or something that just really had her, Kat's twin sister Catherine, devastated in Michigan. So Kat, wanting to help her sister, went up to Michigan and would cook the meals for her sister Catherine, would spend the day taking care of her, did this for 3 years, from 2012 to about 2015. Well, she helps her twin sister get well. Her twin sister had retired from a government job up there where she gets a very, very nice pension, and decided to move back to the Birmingham area where she has children living. But they moved back in where they both grew up from the time they were born. After their grandparents who raised them died, an uncle of Kat and her twin sister Catherine, Uncle Napoleon, took over the property took over that house next to the Tuxedo Junction building where Kat had lived from the day, since from the day she was born. She was even born inside that house, by the way, in Tuxedo Junction area, Park, Erskine Harkins Park area. And so Kat was only away from Birmingham and only away from that home where she was born and grew up for 3 years between 2012 and 2015. Her uncle welcomed Kat and her twin sister Catherine back into the house from Michigan. Everything was hunky-dory. They were fine except for one thing. Catherine, her twin sister, had a dog that was not house-trained and was making a mess of the carpets in the living room and the den and tearing up the cabinets in the kitchen. And the uncle spent about $3,000, he told me, repairing all those things, and then told Kat's twin sister, Catherine, that, you're welcome to stay, and Kat's welcome to stay. In fact, I'm glad to have you all here, but the dog has to stay outside. Now, let me tell you something else first. When Kat first came into the church in the mid to late 60s, her grandmother was still alive, and the grandmother didn't want Kathy attending a church that met on Saturdays. Said, you need to be going to, to the Lord's Day, to attending a church on Sunday. And Kat's twin sister, Catherine, would stand up for Kat and say, Grandma, let Kat go where she wants to go now. That's her decision, her choice to make. Let her go where she wants to go. So Catherine, Kat's twin sister, Catherine, stood up for Kat on that, and so the family backed down and let Kat go where God called Kat, to the church that God called Kat to be part of. And the church that many of you who are tuned in here tonight have been called to be a member of, part of the body of it. And so that's a little history there. And Catherine stood up for Kat against the rest of the family, saying, no, you should be doing church on Sunday, not on Saturday. And Judaizing and all that, So Catherine stood up for her. Now, I tell you that because Catherine is listed with the nursing home as the sponsor of Kat, which means the guardian. And I don't know to what extent that's been taken. I don't know if you can just simply I know they put my mother in confinement in a geriatrics Lulu section after she had been in the hospital for 3 days with a shoulder injury after she fell out of her bed. And, I witnessed when a doctor sent in a employee to do an analysis and interrogate or ask my mother some questions. She only asked her 2 questions. And this was on a day after my mom had been kept awake for 3 nights in a row with another patient. They didn't have limited visiting hours, and another patient would have a friend who could only come at night because I don't know how the friend stayed up all night for 3 nights and then would go to work. Maybe she could sleep on her job at work. I don't know. But anyway, she'd come and the 2 women would yak, yak, yak all night long. And my mother complained to us, her family, that, hey, this is the 3rd day in a row that they've kept me up. And the lady wouldn't hear Mom in the bed next to her because she'd be sleeping all day so she could stay up and talk all night with her friend that would come and keep my mom awake all night. So after 3 days of this, 3 days and 3 nights of that, my mom, they send in this person to ask my mom, okay, do you know what the date today is? Well, no, my mom didn't know. I don't even think I knew. But they're not interviewing me. They're interviewing my mom. But we're there, and we don't realize the extent of what this interview is supposed to be about. So they ask her, but I heard this. I'm right there when they're doing it. And they send in these young, very pretty girls so that nobody will, so they can get away with this, you see. Well, my mom can tell her the date, and so then she asked her, well, Mrs. Gilbreth, what day of the week is it? Well, my mom couldn't answer that question. She'd been kept awake through it. What day did I come in here? What day is this? Big deal. Who cares? I'm trying to heal. Anyway, my mom didn't say those words, but, it's kind of like, what's going on? What's all these questions about? Well, it was only 2 questions, and so it didn't seem like a big deal. Next thing we know is we get word that from that interview, my mom had been determined to be disoriented and mentally and had a mental disorder. From those two questions, I can guarantee you there are a lot of people who couldn't answer those two questions every day of the week. Some days I can't tell you what the date is or what day it is until I look at a calendar. And they didn't provide my mom a newspaper, or there's no calendar on the wall or any of that there. So on that basis, they had my mom transferred downstairs to the basement into the geriatrics Looney Tune area, for mentally retarded people. And you have to have a code to get in, or somebody has to punch that code and let you in. And you have to do the code to get out, which is kind of scary. You wonder sometimes you go visit somebody in there, are they going to claim you're loony and not let you out? So I was always careful when I go visit my mom. But I would visit my mom every time that thing was open, and after a week, the doctors held a meeting, finally said my mom could come home. But if I hadn't been there till the day my mom died, my mom might have ended her days in one of those Looney Tunes sections. And they make money from the government by getting people in there. And so they cooperate with anybody that wants to have a family member committed, and they call them their sponsor. Whether that person's paying money or not, the nursing home is getting money from somebody, from the government or somebody, from every body they have in these things. So they're glad to say, yeah, you're loony, come on in. And many of the staff that works in that nursing home would say to me, there are people that work here that are more, they put it the other way, Kat is more sane than many of the people that work here. Which, that's, and it's true, it actually is true. I would notice when they would say that, yeah, there are some pretty crazy people on your staff here. Some of them are loony, some of them are wacky, some of them think they're God. And there are some nice people that work there too, but some of them admitted and acknowledged Kat's got more sense than a lot of the employees who work in that place. And so it gives you a little idea. But then they start giving Kat this mind-dulling poisons and, drugs, medicine. They call it medicine. But it's just mind-dulling poison, killing the brain. So Kat's definitely not of the mental acuity that she had when she first went in there. And of course, when she first went in there, she was recovering. While she was up taking care, helping her sister get well, Kat was used to an environment in Alabama that's not as cold as Michigan. She gets her sister well, and she winds up getting the flu. And her sister comes home, brings Kat back with her, and brings Kat back here sick. Kat's sick when she gets back here. And Kat wanted to stay with her uncle, but because of that dog, the sister got upset and angry because the uncle said the dog couldn't stay in the house, so she moves in with her daughter and takes Kat with her. And Kat says, I want to be back with my uncle. No, you can't go back over there. He's mean. And they kept the key and wouldn't let Kat have the key. And one day Kat tells them, I'm moving back with my uncle. And while they're gone, Kat takes off. It's about 7-8 miles away. Kat walks. And she makes it over there. She knows the way, and she wasn't incoherent. She was able to walk to her uncle's place. Her uncle's at work. She doesn't have a key. She sits on the back porch, waits till her uncle gets home. But when the rest of the family got back and saw Kat missing, they called the police and filed a missing person report. They used that missing person report as part of their means of saying Kat needs to be put in confinement because she's, liable to walk all over town and get lost and hurt herself. Well, she didn't get lost. She found her way to her uncle's place, was sitting on the back porch, didn't have a key, she couldn't go in. And when the uncle got the phone calls, Kat's missing. He goes outside, finds her out there on the porch, and says, no, she's right here at my place. What are y'all talking about? And they're mad at him, so they had Kat put in confinement. And so, and they've already got the plans for, they're both twin sisters going to be buried in the same plot, one on top of the other, and sister wants to make sure Kat gets buried in that family plot and all that, and then she'll be buried on top of Kat. But Kat may outlive her, because Kat's in better shape than her twin sister who had her confined. But her twin sister and her twin sister was happy to meet me and was happy I was making the visits. But then when the twin sister became incoherent started becoming confused, and the staff, when they'd call her, would say, "Hey, she's more disoriented than Kat ever might be, even when Kat's been injected with a lot of these mind-dulling drugs." The twin sister who's not in there is more incoherent than Kat on drugs, which Kat doesn't take voluntarily. They force them on her. And so somebody else now, a niece of Kat, has been using the name of Kat's twin sister, who has the sponsorship, to say the church members cannot visit Kat. I don't think Catherine, even though she's mad at the uncle and had Kat confined, she thought she was doing Kat good, because Kat had been sick and they couldn't take care of her. The uncle worked, so he couldn't help nurse Kat back to health. But Kat's well now, so let her out of there. But no, they want to insist on giving her mind-dulling drugs, and the niece of Kat's twin sister, or it's the daughter of Kat's twin sister, but Kat's niece, is using Catherine's name to say, give her the drugs. Don't let anybody that's going to interfere with that in there. Don't let any of her church members in there. Don't let her church minister in there to see her. And the nursing home is complying with that. And so there are the two abuses. One is cutting Kat off from Sabbath worship, which I was very happy to go and provide one-on-one, especially during this time while we're scattered. It works for being scattered. I do my live stream in the morning. I'd go over and spend the afternoon with Kat, and we'd one-on-one read from the Bible. I could stop in the middle of, if we were reading a psalm, I could stop in the middle of the verse. Kat could finish the verse. She's not incoherent. She's not mentally retarded. She knows the Bible better than a lot of people do, and can finish and knows it without a Bible in her hand. You can stop reading the verse, she'll finish it for you. That's more than a lot of us can do. And she can sing the hymns without the words and sing them a cappella. She's not mentally retarded. She's not incoherent. She's not even showing signs of great dementia. Now, she is showing signs of being whacked out by these mind-dulling drugs. But before they give her the drugs, she can be fine. We can have good conversations. She can quote scripture. They come and force these drugs on her, and then she's like, yeah, you would be too. So would I. I'm glad they hadn't hog-tied me in there and forcing that down my throat. But so we got to get her out of there, brethren. We got to pray, God help us get her out of there. And there are people, I believe Vesta may be one of them, who would say, come on into my home. I'll help take care of you. I got plenty of space here. Would love to have you. And come on, stay with me. And but we've at least, regardless, I mean, Kat was kind of all right being in the place, although she will always be sad that she couldn't leave when her family would visit. She couldn't leave with them. Now, she did start complaining to me later when her family would take her out. She said, I'm going to tell on you guys because you guys are doing some nasty stuff. When you've cut off her from seeing her church members, I'm going to tell the rest of it because you're doing some nasty stuff. Kat doesn't like going out when y'all take her out because she comes back and says to me, all they do is drink. They get stone drunk. All they want to do is drink when I go out. I don't enjoy that. So she doesn't really enjoy, except for being with you, she doesn't enjoy it when y'all start drinking and you get stone drunk in her presence and then even drive while under influence. She doesn't like that at all. And so you guys doing some pretty nasty stuff. And especially cutting off her church people from seeing her, and then taking part with those who would speak up when Kat says, I don't want those mind-dulling drugs, and you tell the nursing home, go ahead and make her take them. That's wrong. Absolutely wrong. And Kat has a spiritual family that is standing up for her. Brethren, I need you to pray that we'll be able to effectively come to Kat's rescue, just the same as you would want that rescue for yourself. And the family may need a little correction, her blood family. But we certainly hope God will work this out so that there will ultimately, eventually be love. We don't want to do anything with hatred. We want to do it lovingly. But, we've all tolerated a lot as long as Kat could have the Sabbath with her church brethren and her minister and have some worship before God and a Sabbath type service in that in that nursing home confinement situation. It used to scare me going in there at first. I used to really wonder if anybody's going to try to keep the door locked when I want to leave. They gave me the code at first, and then they took it away from me and changed the code because they decided, hey, nobody but us hospital, nursing home people should have the code. When they gave me the code, I felt kind of comfortable. I knew I could always let myself out of there. But seeing what they did to my mother, and being familiar with the truth behind the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I always had my concerns. Do I really want to go inside one of these things if somebody might nab me and tie me up and not let me out of here and fill me full of some of those drugs, and then they say, see there, he's wacko. They think our religion is wacko, and brethren, they hated Christ. Christ told us, he said, if they hated me, they're going to hate you even more. Well, let me see. Wait a minute. Let me make sure I'm not paraphrasing that incorrectly. Will you bear with me? Let me punch this up. We only have a few more minutes, and I'll have to go. Bible. If they hated me, they'll hate you. I think that'll get us the verse. All right, John 15:18 through 17. If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belong to the world will love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world. Brethren, that's talking to us. We are to come out of this world. As it is, you do not belong to this world, but I've chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. Brethren, they hate us. They want to persecute us. Remember what I told you. A servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. A servant. We're the servant. Christ the master. We're not greater than the master. If they hated me, they're going to hate you. And they persecute us. And we want to be careful not to bring this into a great Sabbath versus Sunday issue ahead of time. That's definitely going to come when, let me back this out. There's a reason why I had this graphic on this screen over here with the false prophet on the white horse. That's a the devil comes as an angel of light. He pretends to be Christ. Christ returns, as Revelation 19 tells us, on a white horse. So the first seal of Revelation 6, that, Christ explained the seals in plain language in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21. That first seal is the devil pretending to be Christ, riding a white horse. He's got his false prophet. When Christ explaining that in plain language as religious deception, saying, many will come in my name, saying that I, Jesus Christ, am the Christ, saying that I, Jesus, am the Christ, and yet they will deceive many. We should have a little fun with that and say they'll deceive a few here and there. No, he says they will deceive many. And so that first seal is religious deception. Let's take a look quickly before we close it up. So we have read a few things out of the Bible tonight for the Bible study, Friday night Bible study, the Sabbath Eve Bible study. But, we always call it by the Roman context. We have to interface with the world. We'd call it Friday night Bible study. And it was clear we weren't coming on Saturday night, but Friday night for Sabbath Eve. Eve of a day is right after sunset, because the days begin at sunset, but it's confusing in this world where the world begins days at midnight, and so you have to do two kinds of thinking. You have change your thinking back and forth. You know, if you're thinking Roman calendar, the day ends at midnight. New day begins just after midnight. You do it on God's calendar, the way it's going to be done in the future for eternity, through the millennium anyway, the days start at sunset. Well, way before midnight. But in Revelation 19, in about verse 10, let's start at verse 9 and just read a few verses there that show how Christ returns on a white horse. And so that's why seal number 1, representing the false prophet who pretends to be Christ, why he's riding a white horse. He's pretending to be Christ. So he's deceiving people. He rides the horse of the color that Christ rides when Christ returns. He rides it now before Christ returns to deceive people. So verse 9, Revelation 19, and he saith unto me, Write, blessed are... Now, you know, this is saying unto John who did the writing. Write this, John. Blessed are they which are called unto the marriage supper of the Lamb. Blessed because that marriage only happens for the spring harvest. What a blessing that is, to become the wife, the bride, the wife of Jesus Christ. And he who told him to do the writing saith unto me, These are the true sayings of God. And I fell at his feet to worship him. And he said unto me, See you do it not. I'm your fellow servant, and of your brethren that have the testimony of Jesus. Worship God, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. And verse 11, I saw heaven opened, and behold, here it is now, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, and he had a name written that no man knew but he himself, and he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. No question there, we're talking about Jesus Christ. And again in verse 11 of Revelation 19, it clearly shows, and I saw heaven open, and behold, I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat on him is called Faithful and True. So Jesus Christ, Revelation 19, returns on a white horse. Revelation 6, the devil's false prophet rides a white horse so that he can deceive. And as Revelation 12:9 says, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, who deceiveth the whole world. Revelation 12, verse 9. Who deceiveth a few people here, a few people there. No, it says he deceives the whole world. Tout le monde, if you're in France, or for those who understand the French expression. Tout le monde, all the world. Satan deceives the whole world. He's got his false prophet riding on a white horse to appear as if he were Jesus Christ, and with Christ saying, Many will come in my name, saying that I, Jesus, am the Christ, and yet shall deceive a few people here, a few people there. No, shall deceive many. Brethren, that's it. We've got to wrap it off tonight. Please do pray for Kathy Williams, that we can start having services again together on the Sabbath. Worst case scenario, back in that nursing home. Or because of what's happened there, if God wants to say, let's get her out of there. Let's don't even put her into a situation where somebody, when nobody's looking, might try to force drugs down her throat. And they hate it that Cat wants to be an exception, because they do it to everybody so they can treat everybody like a herd of cattle. We're going to put them all to sleep now. We're going to knock their brains out with these powerful mind-dulling drugs, so they'll all go to bed and be docile, and the night person can just, la-di-da, not have to deal, and the place is quiet at night, and nobody have to And the staff not have to, one person can deal with them all. And they have men and women in the same ward, which works out to be a problem at times. There have been times I've been there hearing women scream because some men just walked into their room while they were dressing and had no clothes on. Ah! And the men just do that. They just walk right into, and some of them are loony in that loony section. And so some of the men just, not knowing any better in some cases, they just walk right in. But that also means they don't know right from wrong because of whatever's happened to their minds. And they might just decide to do anything they want to do at the moment. And so sometimes they have very limited staff. And so they just give them all mind-dulling drugs to make it easy to deal with them. If they weren't loony when they went in there, after they give them all those drugs, they're definitely going to be loony. And they do that to Kat. That's a shame. And shame on you, family, who subjected your blood kin to that. And the real sadness in this, for those who've done that, there is a law that says you reap what you sow. It's like a law of gravity. Nobody is an exception to the law of gravity. You step off the side of a mountain, shoo, down you go. Okay, you say, all right, I'll put on a parachute. I'll take along a kite. Okay, we're not talking about exceptions like that. We're talking about you step off the side of a mountain, gravity, or in any situation where gravity can get you, it pulls you down. And it's just like that law of gravity. Gravity works. This reap-sow law works. You sow evil against a person, that very same thing may come back on you. And that's sad to see. You don't want to wish evil on anybody. Moses was very distraught when he heard the Pharaoh announce the death of the firstborn, because Moses had already been told by God that whatever Pharaoh announces to be done against Israel will be done to their own people. And Moses knew a lot of those people. He was raised with them. He loved them. And to hear Pharaoh announce a death sentence on the firstborn, Moses immediately knew that was a death sentence on the firstborn of Pharaoh's own people and all the families of Egypt. And they would not be covered by the death angel and the blood that the Israelites were able to put around their doorpost and be protected from that death angel. And so Moses, in the movie, they portrayed that pretty well, with Charlton Heston showing great sadness right after Pharaoh announced that all of the firstborn of Israel would be killed, with Moses knowing God was going to apply that to all of the firstborn of the Egyptians. Brethren, got to go for this Friday night Bible study. Thank you for joining me. God willing, and the creek don't rise, and if we got our internet working properly tomorrow, we plan to be on AM in the United States, PM in the United Kingdom, that the time's posted on our site. We originate at 9:30 a.m. Central Time. Just figure it out from there. That's 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time in the United States. We're in the archive for those of you on the West Coast, because that's 7:30 a.m. in the morning. If you're still going to be in the sack at that time and don't want to listen from your bed, you can tune it in from the archive later, from Sabbath.tv or from the Sabbath service page on Facebook Live. And in the United Kingdom, it's 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon when we'll do the daytime Sabbath service on this Sabbath, the 18th day of the 11th month on the Roman calendar. Tonight, on Friday night, it's February 2nd. Tomorrow for the Sabbath service, it'll be February 3rd, 2018. Brethren, have a wonderful Sabbath this Sabbath. Hope you have a good, refreshing night of sleep. As you get your prayers in tonight, hopefully you'll be praying before you go to bed and mention Kathy Williams, and that God will help us to affect what would please Him, to be showing love to our longtime sister in the faith and help get her where she can have Sabbath fellowship again. Help create a situation where if she stays there, they won't force the mind-dulling poisons and drugs upon her when she says, I don't want those. That'd be a good prayer, because God hears from enough of us. I think he'll want to answer it in a favorable and positive way. He's already set the steps where that can be made possible to happen, even if we have to file a court proceeding called a protective proceeding. And Michael Nielsen, thank you very much for finding Jack Carney's words on Justia, an attorney from Birmingham, Alabama, who is experienced in dealing with these things, understands it, and sees the value and good for fighting for someone who's being abused, even by their own family, and where guardianships are evilly created, abusively created, that need to be turned around. You know, brethren, sometimes we got to get in there and do something. So please give us your prayers that we'll do it in a godly way, and that God will open all the doors we need open and provide everything we need to be able to affect this in a positive and effective way, in an effective and positive way for all concerned. It's very important. So please do pray about it. Kathleen Williams. God will know who you mean if you just say, God, please help Kat. Help Stephen as he's helping Kat. Especially help Stephen, guide him to have wisdom to guard his words, to guard his anger, to control it, and to have the anger when he needs to have the anger. There is a time you've got to show some gut, some anger, some grit. Otherwise, there are some people who will abusively just walk right over you when they have no authority, no position. I love that part of the Declaration of Rights that says, no man, no person, no agency, nothing whatever can interfere with a person's free exercise of religious worship. And as long as that's the law of the land, you know, Paul, Peter, they called on it. I'm a Roman, you know, and of course, and you use the law when you have it. Now, of course, things went where they got martyred. Things are coming where we're going to see persecution. But until that time comes, we should show love for one another and not let a member be strangled and killed off early with abuse and mind-dulling drugs. You kill Kat's spirit and her personality, you know, what's there to live for? You know, and then you're miserable. And our people should not be prematurely subjected to that kind of thing, when by some of us standing up, even if it from a distance has to be on your knees. You know, you can stand up on your knees. By that I mean on your knees you pitch God, you know, diligently, and that's standing as a man or as a woman would do. You know, your prayers, all of us, you know, man, woman, even some of you kids who can pray when you see somebody being abused. God can hear it and respond to it, and let's pitch him. Let's pitch him for this. All right, brethren, happy Sabbath. God willing, we'll be back on hopefully with a good running live stream. Please pray about that too. I may have to call our internet service provider even on the Sabbath after I check things tonight and see if we were able to broadcast okay. But your prayers appreciated. Happy Sabbath, everybody. Till next time, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Shabbat Shalom.